Hi guys. Okay, so I decided to start a new series, character developer series of how we can make use of a application, in this case Daz Studio, to create and generate the necessary player models that you may want for your game, as particularly in the area of, let's say, studio grade, triple A development that was motivated by me watching the Ninja Theory video blog of how they're insisting that they are indie developer company, which I assume is based on the notion that they taken no funding whatsoever from the big boys as to the financial needs of their game. But we're going to do it with a bit of a slight of a twist in that we're going to focus a little bit more on those who are on some low-end budget as to, let's say, wanting to experiment with high-end detailed player models to, I guess, to kind of learn what are the requirements that a company like a Ninja Theory would take advantage of with a substantial budget versus the need for the power of knowledge, let's say, of what actually does make for a usable character actor, in this case, Senna, in Hellblade, as to the finer details of motion capture studio gear and a motion capture lab and highly talented individuals that can take a concept and bring it into visualized position of abuse. So my eye here, of course, is more for the macaroni and cheese kind of budgeted and minded person who wants to be, let's say, at least exposed to that high end type of information that is now been made available, and this is certainly particularly ramping up as far as the introduction of the Unreal 4 engine as to its ability to parse extremely large number of details, information without limitation. Was kind of hindering a lot of game engines who was focusing on the fact that it was a game engine. So we're going to be, in my series, I'm going to be rather unassuming as to needs, but rather focus on a broad range use as far as wanting actors for the purpose of visualization. If you're looking to create visual media inside of Unreal 4, this is definitely a pathway that will give you a quick jump start as to the availability of a tool that would naturally fill in that position. Now, on the top of it, Daz Studio is unassuming, so it doesn't go around saying, hey, this tool is made for Unreal 4, it's made for this, it's made for that. It's had a high degree of popularity as far as digital design goes, in general, being able to introduce the low-cost 2D elements as part of the development of a product, let's say. It's been used for in the movie industry. It's been rather popular in blockbuster films that you may have heard of, like Iron Man and Thor and those kind of needs to have a quick solution to something that would be astronomically expensive to develop over the course of time. So if we wanted to, we can kind of just sort of sit down and knock out as many characters that we wish, all ready to rock and roll as far as wiring up the technical requirements, particularly if we cannot afford full body scans, we cannot afford facial scans for acquiring morph targets. We cannot afford the time to develop the character to the point that it could be hooked up to a motion capture solution, which would obviously take a considerable amount of time. So there are some tools in here that will allow you to do that as part of a hands-on sweat equity type of process. So Once again, it's something that Daz Studio does very well, because that's what it was designed to do. It was to create a visually appealing type of characters without restriction as to requirements and limitations, and then you simply iterate what it is that you need down to ultimately including it as part of your video game. So for a lot of you, this might not be of interest, because it is unless you watch the whole series, everything becomes rather disconnected. It seems like it's going off in different directions at times, which is more to do with the demonstration of the process as the project, and the end goal is not definable as being ultimately something that's going to be used as a real-time asset, but can be further iterate as part of that development process. So to keep everybody's sanity, I did break it down into two parts. And the first part includes 4 videos of about 5 hours in duration, I believe. And then the second part will be based more on some of the questions that might be derived from that process to deal with specific needs and requirements. And that's always been the kind of the problem with actually sitting down and doing something that is of value is what do they want to know? What it is that is important as to steps. Like for me, the process of exporting is simply something that I do take for granted, so I don't necessarily believe or think that is necessary to demonstrate the process versus the ability to develop visually what's in front of me. So as need occurs, I basically move forward within the process of developing a character, disregarding any the requirements and limitations of what the engine represents or presents, so to speak. So, I think the point of this series will be really to give a much broader overview as to answering the question: is an application like Daz Studio a worthwhile worth the effort to actually sit down and learn all the buttons and the possibilities that is probably be about as complex as me trying to sit down and do a video presentation on the usability of say an application like Blender, from everything from showing how to build your asset to ultimately how to send it out and export it over to Unreal 4 for practical use. So I hope it's I hope this series and this is not as confusing. So breaking it down into 2 parts like this seems like a logical way to go, rather than doing a complete binge watch kind of series. And look forward to doing a part 2 based on interest. Now I'm not looking for thousands and thousands of views, but rather a general interest in my interest of wanting to pass on this kind of information. Some of it motivated by personal objectives, and a desire that this becomes kind of a standardized way, a preferred way of introducing a character design pathway that can be expanded upon, hopefully by Epic themselves, as well as maybe those out there who are making assets like blueprints and character systems that seem rather limited. If we look at the marketplace, everything is designed for the Epic rig, which is a painting yourself into a corner asset, in that once you have it installed and what have you, it's rather difficult to try to figure out how to replace the placeholder assets with something that should be just plug and play and ready to rock and roll. So I think that's about as much as I want to cover at this stage. So let's get on with the show, guys. Enough chit chat. I hope you enjoy it, and find at least the availability of a free application and a free base model, something worthwhile just to kind of experiment, because, well, it is free. So all it's going to cost you is your time and effort to learn how to make use of a product that has already established itself as a viable option. Taking in consideration that since 4.16, as well as the introduction of the Genesis 3 framework, there's been a lot of movement in this area as far as popular use and video tutorials that are specific to how-tos that are not as long and drawn out as the series. Once again, I hope you enjoy this. Let's make it fun. In part 2, as I said, you toss out some need to know kind of questions, then I'll certainly put them on my list of things to cover, and we'll do that as part of a project series too as well, to kind of demonstrate the overall practicality of a fully featured application as to what it can do today, rather than an application that promises what it will do tomorrow. Okay, so on with the show, guys. See you later.